7 years of devotion ended with a request, so audacious, so utterly devoid of shame, that for a moment, Marissa simply forgot how to breathe. She stood in the center of their pristine living room, the city's skyline glittering indifferently through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Standing opposite her was Garrett, the man she was supposed to marry in less than 24 hours. He didn't look guilty. He didn't look conflicted. He looked impatient, checking his watch as if her silence was wasting his valuable time. "Marissa, you're overreacting," Garrett sighed, running a hand through his carefully styled hair. "It's not like I'm canceling our marriage. I'm just saying we postpone the ceremony. Lana needs this more than you do." Marissa's voice was dangerously quiet. "You want to give our wedding venue, the historic estate my father pulled strings to book 3 years ago, to your assistant for a fake wedding." "It's not fake to her mother," Garrett snapped, his tone dripping with self-righteous indignation. "The poor woman is in hospice care. Her final wish is to see Lana in a white dress, walking down the aisle. I promised I'd make it happen. It's a charity act, Marissa." "Where is your compassion?" Compassion. That was the word Garrett always used as a weapon. Marissa looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. She saw the arrogance in the set of his jaw, the way his eyes dismissed her pain as inconvenient. "And the groom?" Marissa asked, her nails digging into her palms. "Who is playing the groom in this heartwarming little play?" Garrett adjusted his cuffs, avoiding her gaze for a split second, before meeting it with defiant confidence. "I am, obviously. It would look suspicious if it were anyone else. Lana's mom knows me as her boss. She trusts me. It's just acting, Marissa. Once the old lady is satisfied, we'll have our real wedding next month. Maybe something smaller, more intimate." "And my dress?" "Well," Garrett gestured vaguely toward the garment bag hanging on the door. The custom lace masterpiece Marissa had designed herself. "Lana is about your size. It would save time. You can just buy another one later. You have the money." Something inside Marissa snapped. It wasn't a loud crack. It was the quiet, final sound of a bridge burning. Memories flashed before her eyes like a highlight reel of humiliation. Her 30th birthday dinner, where she sat alone for 2 hours because Lana had a flat tire, and Garrett had to rescue her. The anniversary trip to Napa that was canceled because Lana was overwhelmed with a project. Garrett had always framed it as him being a good boss, a mentor. But a mentor doesn't ask his fiancée to surrender her wedding day. A mentor doesn't ask to borrow his bride's gown for another woman. He wasn't asking for a favor. He was testing her submission. He was banking on the fact that Marissa Vance, the quiet, well-mannered daughter of a respectable family, would never make a scene. He was counting on her desperation to be loved. He had bet wrong. "You are right," Marissa said. Her voice was steady, smooth as glass. Garrett blinked, surprised by her sudden surrender. "I am, absolutely," Marissa continued, a small, unrecognizable smile playing on her lips. "If her mother is dying, who am I to stand in the way? It's the noble thing to do, Garrett. You're such a good man." Relief washed over Garrett's face, instantly replacing the tension. He stepped forward to kiss her forehead, but Marissa turned away just in time, pretending to reach for her phone. "I knew you'd understand," he said, his ego fully inflated. "You're the best, babe. Really. Lana is going to be so relieved. I have to go to the hospital now to help them prep. I'll text you later." "Don't worry about me," Marissa said, her back to him. "Focus on Lana. You are a saint." The door clicked shut. Silence rushed back into the apartment. Marissa didn't cry. The tears she might have shed for this relationship had dried up years ago, wasted on lonely nights and empty apologies. Instead, she felt a cold, exhilarating clarity. She walked to the window and watched Garrett's car pull out of the driveway, speeding off toward his charity case. "You win, Garrett," she whispered to the empty room. "You can have the wedding. You can have the girl. But you don't get to keep the life I built for you." She turned and walked into her heavy walk. In closet, she didn't pack clothes. She didn't pack toiletries. She reached onto the top shelf, behind a stack of cashmere sweaters, and pulled out a small velvet box. Then, she retrieved a burner phone she had kept turned off for 3 years. Her hands didn't shake as she powered it on. There was only one number saved in the contacts. It was labeled simply, "In case of emergency." But to the rest of the world, that number belonged to Russell Thorne, the man who owned half the skyline she was looking at, the man whose proposal she had rejected 7 years ago because she thought Garrett was her soulmate. The phone rang once, twice. Marissa. The voice on the other end was deep, rich, and immediate. There was no hesitation. "No, who is this?" He knew. "Russell," Marissa said, her voice dropping an octave, shedding the polite fiancé persona she had worn for so long. "Tell me you are not calling to invite me to the wedding tomorrow," Russell said. His tone was dry, but there was an underlying current of intensity that made her skin prickle. "No," Marissa replied, leaning against her vanity table, catching her own reflection in the mirror. She looked fierce. She looked ready. "I am calling to ask if that standing offer, the one about saving me from a boring life, is still valid." A pause on the other end. Then a low, dark chuckle that sounded like a promise. "I'll have the helicopter on your roof in 20 minutes. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate the sheer, devastating efficiency of the emergency contact upgrade. Most women keep a spare key or a pint of Ben & Jerry's for emergencies. Marissa kept a billionaire on speed dial. Notice that she didn't call her mother to cry, she called her exit strategy, and Russell didn't ask, "Are you sure?" or "Let's talk about it." He sent a helicopter. That, my darlings, is the difference between a man who wants to date you and a man who has been waiting to save you from your own bad taste. If your plan B has a rotor blade, you were never really stuck. You were just parked. "Make it 10, Marissa said. "I have a wedding to get to, just not the one Garrett thinks I am attending." Done, Marissa hung up the phone and looked at the custom wedding dress hanging on the door. With a calm, deliberate movement, she took a pair of shears from her sewing kit. She walked over to the gown, the silk, the lace, the dreams of a naive girl, and sliced the bodice cleanly down the middle. "Oops," she murmured. "Guess Lana will have to pin it." She grabbed her purse, stepped over the ruined silk, and walked out the door without looking back. The penthouse apartment felt different the moment Marissa closed the door. It wasn't a sense of loss. It was an eerie calm, like the eye of a hurricane. 48 floors up. The city was still sleeping, but Marissa was wide awake. She moved through the room she had meticulously decorated for a life that was now dead. She didn't pack clothes. She didn't pack photos. Garrett could keep the mundane artifacts of their relationship, the coffee maker they'd argued over, the throw pillows he hated. She was packing her identity. From the safe behind a painting in the study, she retrieved a thick, velvet-bound folder. Inside were the deeds to properties Garrett didn't even know existed, her grandmother's tiara, and a passport in her maiden name, Vance. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Garrett. "Babe, don't wait up. Lana is a mess. Need to stay at the hospital. You go ahead to the venue tomorrow and settle in. Love you, love." The word was a cheap sticker slapped over a cracked foundation. Marissa huffed a laugh, dry and humorless. "Don't you worry, Garrett. I'll be exactly where I need to be." She walked to the balcony, the wind whipping her hair around her face below. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red above. A low thrumming sound grew louder, vibrating in her chest. A sleek black helicopter descended from the night sky, its sheer power and cost glaringly obvious. It hovered for a moment before landing on the private rooftop pad, blades slicing the air with efficient violence. The door slid open before the skids even fully settled. A man stepped out, ducking under the rotors. Russell Thorne didn't just walk. He owned the space around him. Even in the dim light and wind, he was imposing. Broad shoulders in a tailored suit that cost more than Garrett made in a year. His dark hair was windblown, but his expression was locked onto her like a heat-seeking missile. He didn't smile. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply held out a hand, his eyes dark and intense. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice carrying over the noise of the engine. Marissa took a breath, the cold air filling her lungs, and placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, firm, and familiar, a safety net she had ignored for far too long. "I had to be sure," she replied, stepping up into the cabin. Inside, the helicopter smelled of rich leather and expensive scotch. Russell sat opposite her as they lifted off, leaving the penthouse, and Garrett shrinking into insignificance below. "So," Russell said, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers lingeringly. "The wedding is off." "The wedding to Garrett is off," Marissa corrected, taking a sip. The burn of the aged whiskey grounded her. "But I still have a date for tomorrow." Russell raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement dancing in his eyes. "Oh, and who is the lucky groom?" Marissa swirled the liquid in her glass, watching the city tilt below them. "That depends. Are you still single, Mr. Thorne?" Russell didn't blink. He set his glass down with a deliberate clink. "I have been waiting for you to ask that question since you were 22. Then I suppose we have a lot to do before sunrise," Marissa said, her voice steady. "But first, we need to make a stop." "Where to?" "The Vanderbilt estate," she said. "The venue Garrett thinks he is using for his little charity performance." Russell leaned back, a predator sensing a kill. "You want to confront him?" "No," Marissa shook her head, a wicked glint in her usually gentle eyes. "I want to change the locks and maybe redirect the catering." Half an hour later, the helicopter touched down on the expansive lawn of the historic estate. It was dark, the moon casting long shadows over the manicured gardens that were supposed to host her dream wedding. 2 security guards approached, looking confused and intimidated by the unexpected arrival. "Miss Vance?" the head of security asked, recognizing her instantly. "We weren't expecting change of plans, Frank," Marissa said, stepping out with Russell close behind her like a silent, lethal shadow. "Mr. Sterling won't be needing the ballroom tomorrow, or the garden, or the catering." Frank glanced nervously at Russell, who stood with his hands in his pockets, radiating authority. "But the preparations are canceled," Russell cut in, his voice smooth, but leaving no room for argument. "Miss Vance has decided to relocate the event, effectively immediately." He pulled out his phone. "My team is already en route to clear the space. Anything that belongs to Mr. Sterling can be left on the curb outside the gate." There is a specific kind of joy in watching a nice girl finally get petty, leaving the groom's belongings on the curb of the venue he tried to hijack for his mistress. It's poetry. Russell didn't make a scene. He made an administrative decision. It wasn't about ruining the day. It was about correcting the inventory. Garrett thought he could use Marissa's resources to fund his infidelity. Fine, but don't be surprised when the landlord changes the locks and the catering truck detours to a private island. "Left on the curb, sir." The curb. Russell confirmed. "And ensure no one enters the property tomorrow without explicit permission from Miss Vance. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Frank stammered, pulling out his radio. Marissa watched them scramble. It was petty, perhaps, but it felt good. Garrett thought he could manipulate her kindness, use her resources to impress his mistress, and then come crawling back when the applause died down. He thought she was weak. She turned to Russell, who was watching her with an undisguised admiration. "So," she said, "where are we really getting married?" Russell stepped closer, invading her personal space in the best way possible. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. It wasn't the modest diamond Garrett had given her after 3 years of saving up. It was a pink diamond, rare and flawless, surrounded by a halo of smaller stones that sparkled even in the moonlight. "My private island in the Caribbean," he murmured, sliding the ring onto her finger. "It fit perfectly. My jet is waiting at Teterboro. We can be there by breakfast. The judge is a personal friend." Marissa looked down at the ring, then up at the man who had loved her silently, patiently, while she wasted her youth on a man who only loved himself. "Let's go," she whispered. As they walked back to the helicopter, Marissa's phone buzzed one last time. It was a photo from Lana, sent from a blocked number. It showed Garrett sleeping in a hospital chair, looking like a devoted martyr. The caption read, "So grateful for him." Number blessed. Marissa didn't feel angry. She felt nothing. She simply deleted the message, blocked the number, and climbed into the helicopter. Garrett could have his moment of glory in an empty ballroom with no food, no guests, and a bride wearing a ruined dress. She had a plane to catch. The silence at the Vanderbilt estate was deafening. Garrett stood at the altar, adjusting his tie for the 50th time. He checked his watch. 10:45 a.m. The charity ceremony for Lana was supposed to start in 15 minutes. "Where is everyone?" Lana hissed from the doorway of the bridal suite. She was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like a cheap knockoff of Marissa's custom gown, slightly ill, fitting around the bust. Her mother, frail but beaming in a wheelchair, was being attended to by a nurse Garrett had hired for the day. "Traffic," Garrett lied smoothly, though a knot of unease was tightening in his stomach. "It is Saturday morning in the Hamptons. You know how it is." But it wasn't just traffic. The catering trucks hadn't arrived. The florist was missing. Even the string quartet he'd booked through Marissa's contacts was nowhere to be seen. The grand ballroom, which should have been bustling with staff preparing for the reception, was eerily empty. "Garrett," Lana whined, her voice pitching up in panic. "This is embarrassing. My mom is asking where the guests are. You said you invited people from the office." "I did," Garrett snapped, pulling out his phone. "Maybe they're lost. Let me call." His thumb hovered over his assistant's number, then stopped. A notification from Instagram popped up on his screen. Then another, then a flood. "Marissa Vance is live. A new beginning," Garrett frowned. Marissa live. She never used social media for anything personal. She was probably just posting a photo of the venue to help him out, like the dutiful fiancée she was. He tapped the notification, the screen filled with brilliant high-definition video. But it wasn't the Vanderbilt estate. It was a beach. A breathtaking, sun-drenched beach with turquoise water lapping at white sand. And there, standing under an arch of exotic orchids that must have cost a fortune, was Marissa. She looked radiant, not the quiet, accommodating Marissa he knew. Her hair was loose in beachy waves catching the wind. She was wearing a simple, elegant slip dress that clung to her curves in a way he'd never seen before. But it was the man standing opposite her that made Garrett's blood run cold. Russell Thorne, the tech mogul. The billionaire who had been on the cover of Forbes last month. The man Garrett had once pitched to at a conference, only to be dismissed with a polite nod. Russell was holding Marissa's hands, his dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that burned even through the phone screen. "I, Russell Thorne," his deep voice rumbled clearly over the sound of the ocean. "Take you, Marissa Vance, to be my wife, to love you, to cherish you, and to never ever ask you to settle for less than you deserve." Garrett felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Around him, phones started buzzing. Lana's few friends, who had actually shown up mostly to gawk at the free venue, were whispering, pointing at their screens. "Oh my God," someone gasped. Is that Marissa? Wait, isn't she supposed to be marrying Garrett? Dude, look who she is with. That is Russell Thorne. He is worth billions." Garrett stared at his phone, paralyzed. On screen, Marissa was laughing, a genuine carefree laugh he hadn't heard in years, as Russell slipped a massive pink diamond ring onto her finger. "I do," she said, her voice clear and strong. The comments section on the live stream was exploding. "Wait, wasn't she with that loser Garrett Sterling? Upgrade of the century. OMG, look at that ring. Number T Marissa Garrett who..." "Garrett," Lana shrieked, grabbing his arm. "What is going on? Why is Marissa getting married? Where is my photographer?" At that moment, the double doors of the estate swung open. But it wasn't a guest, it was Frank. Same security guard from the night before, flanked by 2 police officers. "Mr. Sterling?" Frank asked, his voice echoing in the empty hall. Garrett swallowed hard. "Yes, we have a noise complaint from the neighbors," Frank said, his face impassive, "and verify of permit. It seems your rental agreement for this property was canceled as of 8 a.m. this morning by the owner." "Canceled," Garrett sputtered. But Marissa booked it. It is paid for." "The booking was under Miss Vance's name," one of the officers explained, consulting a clipboard. "She contacted the venue management early this morning to release the reservation. Since you are not the contract holder, you are technically trespassing." Lana let out a strangled cry. Her mother looked confused. "Lana, sweetheart, is the wedding over?" Garrett felt the walls closing in. The humiliation was total. He looked down at his phone again. The live stream had ended, replaced by a still image of Marissa and Russell kissing against the sunset, with the caption, "Found my forever." "Sorry I couldn't make it to the rehearsal, Garrett. Hope the charity event is a success. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a public execution." "Trespassing," Garrett stammered, his face turning a sickly shade of pale. "But I have guests, a dying woman." "Sir," the officer said firmly, stepping closer, "you need to vacate the premises immediately, or we will have to escort you out." Lana turned on him, her eyes wild with rage. "You said you handled everything. You said this was our day. It was supposed to be." Garrett yelled back, losing his composure completely. "Marissa? She set me up. She left you for a billionaire, you idiot," Lana screamed, shoving his chest. "And you dragged me here to be humiliated in a knockoff dress." The few guests who had remained were now openly filming the scene. This was going to be viral before lunch. Garrett stood alone in the center of the empty, silent ballroom, the echo of his own failure ringing in his ears. His phone buzzed again. A text from his biggest client, who was also watching the stream. "Garrett, we need to talk about your account management. Saw the wedding video. If you can't even manage your own fiancé, how can we trust you with our portfolio we're pulling out?" The first domino had fallen, and the rest were already teetering. If Saturday was the explosion, Monday was the fallout. Garrett walked into the glass-walled headquarters of Sterling and Associates, a name he was allowed to use only because he was a junior partner, with his head held high. Or at least, he tried to. He was wearing his best suit, projecting an image of unbothered competence. He ignored the whispers near the reception desk. He ignored the receptionist, who quickly minimized a browser window that definitely looked like a gossip blog. "Garrett," a voice boomed before he even reached his office door. It was Arthur Sterling, the senior partner and Garrett's uncle, the man who had given him his start, but only because Marissa's father had vouched for him. "In my office now." Garrett swallowed a lump of dread and followed inside. Arthur didn't offer him a seat. He was standing by the window, staring out at the gray city, holding a tablet. "Do you know what the Vance Corporation contributes to our annual revenue, Garrett?" Arthur asked, his voice deceptively calm. Well, it's significant, Uncle Arthur. But my relationship with Marissa is non-existent," Arthur snapped, turning around. His face was red. "You didn't just break up with her, you humiliated her. You tried to give her wedding venue to your secretary while she was still technically your fiancée, and you let it go viral." "It was a misunderstanding," Marissa twisted the narrative. Garrett protested, sweating now. "She ran off with Russell Thorne. She's the one who cheated." "Nobody cares about the truth, Garrett. They care about the optics." Arthur threw the tablet onto the desk. It slid across the mahogany surface, stopping inches from Garrett's hand. It was an email from Marissa's father. Subject: termination of services body. Effective immediately. Vance Corp and all subsidiary holdings are severing ties with Sterling and Associates. We will be moving our portfolio to Thorne Industries. Please direct all future correspondence to our legal team. "Thorne Industries," Garrett whispered. "Russell." "They took everything," Arthur said, sinking into his chair, looking suddenly old. "The Vance account, the charity gala contracts, the real estate listings. That's 40% of our billing, Garrett." 40%. "I can fix this," Garrett said, desperation creeping into his voice. "I can talk to Marissa. She's emotional right now, but she's reasonable. I just need to get in touch with her." "You can't," Arthur said flatly. "Her lawyers sent a cease and desist along with the termination. If you contact her, they sue us for breach of contract on the NDA you signed when you started dating her." Garrett blinked. "I never signed an NDA." "You did," Arthur sighed. "Buried in the prenuptial disclosure documents you were too arrogant to read properly 3 months ago. You signed away your right to discuss her or her family's business publicly. And by live streaming that fiasco on Saturday, you technically violated it." Garrett felt the room spin. He hadn't just lost a girlfriend. He had nuked his career. "Pack your things," Arthur said, looking away. "What?" "You are toxic, Garrett. No client wants to be associated with the guy who got dumped for a billionaire on a live stream. You're a liability. Get out." Meanwhile, 1,500 miles away, Marissa sat on the terrace of the villa, a fresh tropical fruit platter in front of her. She was wearing one of Russell's oversized white shirts and nothing else, watching the turquoise waves roll in. She felt light, unburdened. Russell walked out carrying 2 espressos. He was shirtless, wearing only linen pants, his dark hair damp from a morning swim. He set the cups down and kissed the top of her head. "Authorize the transfer of your family's accounts this morning," he said casually, taking the seat opposite her. "Your father was very eager to sign. Apparently, he never really liked Garrett." Marissa laughed, picking up a slice of mango. "He called Garrett the sentient haircut. He only tolerated him because I insisted he had potential." "Potential is useless without character," Russell said, his eyes darkening as he looked at her. "He treated you like an accessory, Marissa. I intend to treat you like a partner." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Speaking of partnership, I have a proposal, a real one this time." Marissa raised an eyebrow. "We're already married, aren't we? Or was the ceremony on the beach just for show? The ceremony was for us, Russell corrected. But this is business. You designed that wedding dress, didn't you? The one you destroyed. Marissa nodded, a shadow crossing her face. Yes, it took me 6 months. It was brilliant. The structure, the lacework. I saw the sketches in your portfolio years ago. Russell leaned forward. Thorn Industries just acquired a failing luxury fashion house in Milan. It needs a new creative director. Someone with vision. Someone who understands that luxury is about detail, not just a label. Marissa stared at him. You want me to run a fashion house? I want you to build an empire, Russell said firmly. You spent 7 years building Garrett's life. Why don't you spend the next 7 building your own? Marissa looked down at the pink diamond on her finger, then out at the endless horizon. For years, she had made herself small to fit into Garrett's fragile ego. She had dampened her ambition so he wouldn't feel threatened. She looked back at Russell, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. I have a few ideas, she said, back in the city. Garrett stood on the sidewalk outside the office building, a cardboard box of his belongings in his arms. It was raining, because of course it was raining. His phone buzzed. It was Lana. Hey babe, so the hospital bills for mom came in and rent is due. Are you transferring the money to my account or yours? Also, when can we reschedule the wedding? Garrett stared at the text. He looked at the reflection of himself in a puddle, wet, fired, and alone. He typed a reply, "Don't contact me again." He blocked the number. Then he hailed a cab, tossed the box in the back seat, and opened the browser on his phone. He typed in a name he swore he never would. Thorn Industries careers if he couldn't beat them. Well, he had to survive somehow. But as he scrolled through the page, a news alert popped up at the top of the feed. Breaking: Marissa Vance appointed as new creative director of Maison Duval. Shares skyrocket. Garrett dropped his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. She wasn't just winning. She was erasing him. Milan, Italy. 3 months later, the atelier of Maison Duval smelled of espresso, silk dust, and panic. It is impossible, madame. Henri, the head pattern maker, threw his hands up. The show is in 2 days. The structure cannot support the weight of the crystals. The bodice will collapse. Marissa stood before the mannequin, her eyes narrowed. She wore a black turtleneck and tailored trousers, her hair pulled back in a severe, efficient bun. On her finger, the pink diamond caught the harsh studio lights. She didn't shout, she didn't panic. She simply picked up a pair of heavy shears. It won't collapse, Marissa said calmly. Stepping up to the dress, the showstopper meant to close the runway, because we're removing the corset. This moment in the atelier is the true climax of the story. It isn't the wedding or the helicopter ride, it's the scissors. Marissa cutting the corset out of her own design is a perfect metaphor for exciting the suffocating relationship she was in. She stopped trying to force herself into a rigid, painful structure that didn't fit, and instead let herself breathe. Luxury is freedom, not a cage. Write that down. If you have to suffocate to make it work, whether it is a dress or a marriage, it isn't couture, darling. It is just torture. The room gasped, but the silhouette, Henri protested, snip. Marissa cut through the bodice with surgical precision. The heavy boning fell away, leaving the fabric to drape naturally, catching the light like liquid mercury. She grabbed a handful of pins and began to work, her hands moving with a speed and confidence that mesmerized the room. We don't force the woman into the dress, Henri, she murmured, pinning the silk at the waist. We let the dress move with the woman. Luxury is freedom, not a cage. She stepped back. The dress, previously stiff and archaic, now looked modern, ethereal, and dangerous. "Stunning!" a voice came from the doorway. Russell leaned against the frame, holding a tablet. He looked tired but proud. The acquisition had been messy, but watching Marissa resurrect the brand had made every headache worth it. "Did you deal with the board?" Marissa asked, not looking away from her creation. "They're nervous," Russell admitted, walking over to kiss her cheek. "They think a debut collection in 3 months is suicide. They wanted you to play it safe." "Safe is boring," Marissa said, finally meeting his eyes. "And I am done with boring. Is the guest list finalized?" "It is. Every major editor, buyer, and influencer will be there." Russell paused, his expression hardening slightly. "And security has been briefed. No unwanted guests," Marissa smirked. "You mean Garrett? I mean anyone who doesn't belong in your future." New York City. Garrett stared at the television screen in the damp, one-bedroom apartment in Queens that smelled faintly of boiled cabbage. On the screen, Entertainment Tonight was running a special, The Rise of Queen Marissa. They showed clips of her leaving the Milan studio, paparazzi flashing, looking every inch the fashion icon she looks. "Different," Garrett muttered to the empty room. Gone was the soft, eager, to-please girl who used to pack his lunches. In her place was a woman who looked like she could buy and sell him without blinking. His phone rang. It wasn't a job offer. He hadn't had one of those in weeks. The industry blackball was effective. "Yeah?" he answered aggressively. "Mr. Sterling?" The voice was oily fast. "This is Barry from the Daily Scoop. We're running a piece on the Maison Duval debut. We just finished an interview with a Miss Lana Miller. Very colorful stuff." Garrett gripped the phone. "Lana? What did she say?" "Oh, the usual, that you promised her the world, that you were trapped in a loveless engagement with a cold, unfeeling heiress, that you are the victim here. She's painting you as a tragic, romantic hero." Garrett scoffed. "And you believe that?" "Doesn't matter what I believe, matters what sells," Barry said. "But here's the thing, we want the full picture. We want your side. My life in the shadow of the billionaire's wife, exclusive rights, 50 grand. Garrett went silent. $50,000. That would cover his rent for a year. It would pay off his credit cards. But Barry added, "We need an angle. We need you to go to Milan. Confront her. Get a reaction. We'll pay for the flight. You want me to crash her show?" "We want you to get closure, Garrett, on camera." Garrett looked at the television again. Russell was escorting Marissa into a waiting town car, his hand possessively on the small of her back, the way Garrett used to touch her. The life intended for him, rage hot and familiar, bubbled up in his chest. Marissa had moved on too easily. She hadn't suffered. She hadn't cried over him. She had just upgraded. "Book the ticket," Garrett said. Milan, the night of the show, the Palazzo Real was bathed in golden light. The runway was a mirror of black glass. The air vibrated with bass and anticipation. Backstage was controlled chaos. Marissa was adjusting a collar on a model when her headset crackled. Marissa Russell's voice was in her ear. "We have a situation at the South Gate." Marissa froze. "What kind of situation?" "It's him. He's here with a camera crew, screaming your name. Security is holding him back, but the press is eating it up." Marissa closed her eyes for a second. Of course, he couldn't just let her win. He had to try and stain the moment. She felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Henri. "Madame, the show starts in 2 minutes. The music is cueing." Marissa opened her eyes. They were clear, cold. "Let him in," she said into the headset. Marissa, no, Russell argued. I can have him arrested. No, Marissa said firmly. If he wants a show, let's give him one. Seat him front row, right next to Anna Wintour. Are you insane? Trust me, Russell. She straightened her blazer. I'm not the same woman he left at the altar. Let him see exactly what he lost. She turned to the models, a fierce army of silk and leather. All right, everyone, she shouted, her voice commanding the room. Shoulders back, chin up, walk like you own the ground beneath your feet. Go, the music dropped. A heavy industrial beat out on the runway. Garrett was being shoved into a seat by a burly security guard. He looked out of place in his off, the rack suit, sweaty and disheveled, holding a recorder Barry had given him. He looked up, expecting to see a nervous, fragile Marissa instead. The lights dimmed, and the first model stomped out. The collection was aggressive, sharp tailoring, blood-red silks. It was a scream of power. It was everything Marissa had suppressed for 7 years. And then, for the finale, Marissa herself walked out. She didn't wave, she didn't smile demurely. She walked the length of the runway in the black suit she had modified herself, stopped right in front of Garrett's seat, and looked down at him. The cameras flashed, blindingly bright. Garrett opened his mouth to shout his question, to cause his scene. Marissa just tilted her head, looked at him with a mixture of pity and boredom, and then turned her back. As she pivoted, the back of her jacket revealed a design in intricate, hand-stitched silver thread. It was a phoenix, and Garrett realized, as the crowd erupted into a standing ovation that drowned out his pathetic attempt at a confrontation, that he wasn't the hero of this story. He wasn't even the villain. He was just a footnote. The applause didn't just ripple through the Palazzo Real. It thundered. Garrett sat frozen in the front row, the ovation washing over him like a physical blow around him. Editors from Vogue and Harper's Bazaar were already furiously typing into their phones, using words like renaissance, unapologetic, and genius. He looked down at the recorder in his hand. The red light was blinking. He had the footage. He had the confrontational angle Barry wanted. But as the house lights came up, Garrett didn't feel like a scoop hunter. He felt like a ghost haunting a party he wasn't invited to. Mr. Sterling. Garrett looked up. A tall, immaculately dressed man with an earpiece stood over him. It wasn't the security guard from before. It was Russell's personal head of legal, a man named Silas whose smile never reached his eyes. We need you to come with us, Silas said pleasantly, though his grip on Garrett's elbow was iron tight. I have rights, Garrett stammered, trying to pull away as the fashion elite glanced over with mild distaste. I am press. You are a nuisance, Silas corrected. And you are currently in possession of unauthorized recordings of proprietary designs. Walk. Now, they didn't take him backstage to see Marissa. They took him to a sterile holding room near the exit. Russell was waiting there, checking his watch. He looked bored. Give me the phone, Garrett, Russell said, extending a hand. No way, Garrett sneered, clutching the device. This is my insurance. The world is going to see how your wife treats her ex. The Ice Queen narrative is going to sell like hotcakes. Russell sighed, a sound of deep fatigue. Garrett, look at your phone. Look at the stream. Garrett frowned and unlocked the screen. He opened the feed he had been broadcasting to the Daily Scoop's private server. Connection terminated, account suspended. What did you do? Garrett gasped. We own the network provider for the venue, Russell said simply. And we flagged your IP for intellectual property theft the moment you started recording the unreleased collection. Barry at the Daily Scoop got the legal notice 5 minutes ago. He dropped you. Garrett's phone buzzed. "A text from Barry, you're useless. Thorne's lawyers just threatened to bury us if we run your story. Deal's off. Find your own way home. The $50,000 gone. The free flight back gone. You can't do this," Garrett shouted, his voice cracking. "I made her. She was nothing before me." Russell stepped closer, invading Garrett's space for the first time. The billionaire's eyes were cold, hard flint. "She was everything before you," Russell said, his voice low and dangerous. "You were just the anchor dragging her down. And frankly, you're boring us. Silas, escort Mr. Sterling to the airport economy class one way. And if I refuse," Garrett challenged, though his knees were shaking, "then the Italian Carabinieri are waiting outside to discuss the disturbance of the peace and trespassing charges." Russell checked his cuffs. Ciao, Garrett. The after-party, the rooftop of the Bulgari Hotel, overlooked the Milan skyline. It was a sea of champagne, diamonds, and success. Marissa stood by the railing, swirling a glass of sparkling water. She was still wearing the Phoenix suit, though she had kicked off her heels. She looked out at the city, feeling the cool night air on her face. "You look deep in thought for someone who just conquered Europe," a voice said. Marissa turned. Russell was there, holding 2 glasses of vintage Krug. He handed her one. "I saw him," Marissa said quietly, "being escorted out." "Did you want to talk to him?" Russell asked, watching her closely. Marissa thought about it, the anger she had felt for months, the humiliation of the canceled wedding, the betrayal with Lana, the public mockery. She searched for it inside herself, but there was nothing. No fire, no hate, just silence. "No," she realized, a genuine smile breaking across her face. "I don't have anything to say to him. He feels like a stranger. Someone I read about in a bad book a long time ago." Russell clinked his glass against hers. "That Indifference." "The collection sold out," Marissa said, changing the subject, her eyes sparkling. "Buyers from Saks and Neiman Marcus put in orders for the entire line before the show even ended." "I know," Russell grinned. "I may have outbid a few of them for the jagged silk gown. I think it will look better in our closet than in a window display." Marissa laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "So what now? We have a fashion house to run, an empire to build." "Actually," Russell said, pulling a folded envelope from his jacket pocket, "we have a honeymoon to take, the one we skipped to save this company." He handed her the envelope. Inside were tickets. "Destination, Kyoto, Japan, date tomorrow." "Pack your bags, Mrs. Thorne," Russell whispered, kissing her temple. "The world can wait a week. You've earned a rest." New York City, 2 days later, Garrett sat on a park bench in Union Square, eating a cold slice of dollar pizza. It was raining again. He scrolled through Instagram on his cracked phone screen. Faye Mason Duval, The Phoenix Rises, creative director Marissa Vance, Thorne stuns Milan. He scrolled past that, Phelan Ameler Faso, New Beginnings. So blessed to be starting my internship, at he squinted. Lana had gotten an internship where he clicked the photo. It was Lana smiling brightly, holding a coffee cup with a familiar logo. Sterling and Associates. Garrett choked on his pizza. Lana was working for his uncle. He dialed Arthur's number. It went straight to voicemail, but then a text back. "Uncle Arthur, stop calling. Lana showed me the texts where you tried to blame the embezzlement on her. She's cooperating with the audit. You might want to get a lawyer." "Garrett, a cheap one." Garrett dropped the phone. It landed in a puddle. He looked up at the gray sky, waiting for the punchline. But there was no audience, no live stream, no viral moment. Just the quiet, crushing realization that the story had moved on without him. Let's pour a glass of something bold and discuss the charity case boyfriend. Garrett is a classic example of a man who mistakes his partner's kindness for stupidity. He thought Marissa was so desperate to be a bride that she would lend her gown to his mistress just to keep the date. The audacity is almost impressive if it wasn't so pathetic. But here is the lesson. Marissa didn't just leave him. She outgrew him. She ascended. She didn't fight Lana for the scraps of a mediocre man. She let Lana have him. And look what happened. Without Marissa's structure, Garrett collapsed like a cheap tent. He lost his job, his reputation, and his dignity, all on a live stream he couldn't control. Meanwhile, Marissa didn't just find a new man. She found her old ambition. Russell wasn't the prize, he was the mirror that finally showed her who she was supposed to be. So I want to hear from you in the comments tonight. Have you ever held on to a fixer, upper man because you were afraid of the empty lot? Did you realize, like Marissa, that the only thing standing between you and your empire was the weight of the dead wood you were carrying? Tell me your stories of cutting the corset. I'm listening. Madam, read out.